Welcome to the Gender Finance Podcast. In this series, we sit down with finance leaders to hear their stories. Get ready for honest conversations, fresh insights, and inspiring perspectives on the future of finance and the role of women in shaping it.
Welcome to the Gender Finance Podcast. My name is Simon Gorbert. I'm Deputy CEO of Luxembourg for Finance, the development agency for the Financial Centre in Luxembourg. I'm also fortunate to be a member of the Gender Finance Task Force here in Luxembourg under the Ministry of Finance, and also chair of the Working Group on Communications, Events and Talent. And I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio today by Lize-Mari, who is Country President for Swiss Re Luxembourg. Lize-Mari, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here today. So you lead the Luxembourg entity, Swiss Re, obviously one of the largest reinsurers globally. You joined in 2006, I think. And now you're also global CFO for the property and casualty reinsurance business. Mm-hmm. And prior to Swiss Re, you were at PwC, I think, in South Africa.
Yes, correct.
So you're bringing more than 20 years of financial services experience, deep knowledge of insurance, a sector that's dear to my heart as well, as you probably know. So fantastic. When did you come to Luxembourg?
I arrived in Luxembourg in 2012. I arrived here from South Africa directly.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, we're here to talk about all things gender finance and related, and perhaps we can dive straight in. Let's take something reasonably bold. I'm thinking of something that disproportionately affects women, including women in finance, which is the fact that early on, in terms of career development, there's a good balance. Then when we get to later 20s, early 30s, there's a sort of divergence that starts to appear in many cases, where careers take off and yet outward or inward pressures also come along. Having children is, of course, an obvious example. I wanted to ask you if you have faced that, and if so, how have you dealt with those transitions? And importantly, I'd really like to hear from you. What do you think organizations can do or can do more of to support career progression through those different life stages? And by organizations, obviously, I mean the men and women that represent them.
Sure, and thank you for asking the question, Simon. And maybe for the audience, just so that they know, I'm actually a mother and a full-time working person. So absolutely, I mean, this whole concept of, designing career is very relevant for me personally. Mm-hmm. And I honestly believe that a career does not simply happen, right? A career is something that you craft and design. And as you said, that actually starts at a young age. So your early 20s, when you think about what you're going to study, where you're going to go, what do you see for yourself? And then you start designing that, right? And as you design that, you think about your personal ambitions, where you want to go, where you want to land, and then you start working on the ecosystems around you to support you. That is what I've done, right? Mm-hmm. So building the right connections, start focusing on the actions you need to take to get there.
Career design.
So you actually very consciously focus on that. But then, as you say, you enter different life stages. And that is where it becomes not problematic, but in many ways, a conscious decision of how you're going to approach that. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that, ambition doesn't just fade. Ambition is sometimes influenced by not having the right infrastructure or systems around us, as you point to. And I think that is where we need, companies and organizations to focus more and have a less linear view on how career progress and be more agile in terms of approach, right? How we support females, but in general, your workforce with different life stages, and that's very important. I don't think we are there yet, mm-hmm. right? So this is something that we need to work on and that companies actively need to work on to support, especially females through life stages, so that, it doesn't become a trade-off between career design and ambition and life happening aside with that. And clearly, I mean, depending on where you work or what industry you're in, right, it could be, easier to influence that, or it could be more difficult, right? When you're in an environment that is very, timely decisions, client facing, it could be more challenging, right, to navigate that. Where I am in insurance or asset management, you go through longer cycles with longer rhythms, it might be easier. But one thing is clear, right, doesn't where you are, there needs to be intentional design and intentional organizational design to support females with their career progression and for design to actually become reality at the end of the day.
Sure. But it must be quite extreme, this tension from time to time. You know, we hear about this invisible or often invisible burden that women carry. We talk about the unpaid work that women do. You know, how have you managed that? You know, your ambition versus the need to sustain performance. You strike me, certainly from what you say, as someone who takes very deliberate decisions. There must have been times when you have had to say, well, I'll push forward here, but then maybe I need to step back, focus on myself, you know, self-care, sustainability. How have you managed that? And have you ever been forced to change your ambition because of that?
Yes, let me start by saying that, I mean, there is an invisible load, right? I think we need to acknowledge that, right? And it's probably something that holds back many females in their career as well. However, having said that, I think it's really important to emphasize that ambition and, you know, taking that personal responsibility or burden can absolutely coexist. It's very important, I think, throughout your career and as you design it as a female to very consciously think about the different stages of life and understanding that career and personal life is not linear, right? And that was very liberating for me personally to understand that. And what I've personally done is really to sit back and think about priorities. So when you try to have both a career but also be a dedicated parent, for example, as I try to be, it's very important to be very focused on prioritizing, but also how you navigate your energy intentionally. There's certain days and certain weeks and different phases throughout your career and your life where you need to push hard and really go in one area.
Sure.
But you also need to know when to pull back. It's like the ebb and flow of the ocean, right? And that's how you make it coexist. And that's very important. That's what I've personally done a lot. And when I mentor and speak to different females, this is really advice that I give them. It also means when you prioritize that sometimes it comes with compromise, right? Because you can't do everything at the same time. You can't be the best at everything at the same time. And you know what? That is okay. So to learn to prioritize and compromise with the ebbs and flows of the sea, being like that, helps you navigate and channel your energy to the right place at the right point in time. And that's how I personally try to do that.
Certainly.
It doesn't mean that you have days that you feel like a failure or you feel you're not doing right, but that is okay. I think it's important that you acknowledge that and that you deal with that emotion and then you push forward again.
So I hear from you a lot about design, about prioritizing, and about adapting to the different needs of the moment.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that another, you know, we all use our tools and support structures that we either create or invest in. Something that you've been quite open about in the past is what you call spider webs. I'd love to hear more about this. In fact, the last time we spoke, you said, Simon, I know my spider web and I know how it operates. I think the viewers and listeners would be really interested to understand what that is and, you know, how does it work? How have you leveraged that?
Yes, and I'm actually very happy to speak about that. So thank you, Simon. It's something very close to my heart because this has been one of my personal most powerful tools. And it's very important for me to share tools, you know, with others to help them navigate their career. And when I talk about a spider web of networks, that's what I call it. I just mean throughout your career and throughout life, it's very important to have the right connections. Especially when you want to develop and grow, not just in certain circles or in, you know, a specific country, or even nowadays where networks and interactions are so global. You know, it's important to build the right networks around you, which means, right, with peers, with colleagues, internal, external. Have the right mentors at different phases of your life. Have the right sponsors. And that's what I mean by building a spider web all around you. And as you navigate throughout your career and through different life stages, you know, you can actually work with this network to help you to advance. And that is really important. And also, when you get to a phase in your career where you have to take a break, you know, because of maternity leaves or parental care or other family sort of care, it's also very important that you take care of these networks. These are times, and networks is as fragile as a spider web, right? So it's very important that you take those moments, even if it's quick, make sure you have intentional connections, that you keep on building on this invisible spider web, right? Which is also very vulnerable. So it needs active care, active attention, but it's very powerful if you do it the right way.
Ultimately, the work that we're in is very much about relationships, you know, in addition to the skills and the competencies. And I think also for younger talent, it's something that we promote a lot, is using those networks, those connections, and leveraging them as much as possible, because that can really propel one's career. And presumably, not all of if we can carry on with the metaphor, not all of the strands of the web carry the same weight. You might have, as you say, your traditional networks. You've got people that you speak to, maybe that you rely on, you call upon. Some of them carry perhaps more strength. I'm thinking, for example, of sponsors. You know, where do those fit into this spider web?
No, absolutely. I mean, sponsors is like, you know, the anchors of the spider web, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you use your network to advise you, to work with you, right? But sponsors doesn't just advise you, they actually advance you. Those are the people in the room or around you that will advocate for you, that will stand up for you, that will speak for you and create opportunity when you are not there, when you're not visible in the room, right? Networks help you to open doors, sponsors help you to walk through the doors. These are very important. And actually, in my career, when I was moving within South Africa, different roles, then moving to Luxembourg into specific roles here, and then moving on to global responsibilities, the actual powerful people in my life that helped me to navigate this delicate balance between geographical responsibilities, between being ambitious and having a life, personal life with kids, has been sponsors, right? So this is an incredibly powerful tool, right? Also to navigate, not just, as you say, in your, you know, career, you don't just need the skill and the expertise, you need strong relationship and strong networks, but sponsors really help you. And it's a powerful tool when you want to progress to really pull from.
Yeah, and I like your point around, you know, the importance of maintaining and preserving that network, even in the the slower times or the down times, certainly.
No, that's very important. And once again, I can just share an example because I think it's powerful. When I actually was on maternity leave, I once had a situation where the right person at the right time came to Luxembourg, and I made an effort just to have a coffee, right? And that actually had a sustainable impact on my career. So it does matter.
Small gesture, but maintaining the connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes the small things count a lot.
Yeah. So you touched for a moment there on your international work. You've also been involved in global inclusion initiatives, which have taken you beyond Luxembourg, beyond your immediate environment. What have you taken away from those experiences in terms of inclusive leadership? Are there things that you've learned from that you believe other cultures or geographies or industries are perhaps missing out on that they could learn from?
Yes, when I think about inclusive leadership and, you know, across different areas in the world, I think there's a intention and an understanding, you know, that inclusiveness is important. However, sometimes there's still a perception, you know, or actions that, you know, a one-size-fits-all approach, right? From that perspective. And the reality is very different. If you speak to, you know, females across the world, you know, you soon realize that many females still have, you know, certain glass ceilings due to either cultural pressures or societal pressures or even family dynamics, right? Family pressures. And these are really different, right? It's different across different jurisdictions around the world. And I think it's very important that we have an open discussion around that, right? That we don't just work with a one-size-fits-all approach when we try to address this topic, right? And I think that is where it's very important to also build strong connections so that we can have an open dialogue across the world on this topic, It's very important. And that we can make sure that, where females in one location can feel, in one area it could be easier to stand up, to speak up against certain bias, where in another jurisdiction it's harder, right? The consequence coming with that, or perceived consequence, is a bigger risk. And that's where I think we can also work with, beyond boundaries to help and advocate, for what we see in different areas around the world.
So not taking a 2D approach or staying within our own lane, but rather, learning internationally what's happening in other regions and how different cultures and different approaches can also help us.
Exactly. And I think it's important, right? Because I also think by just sharing nuggets across boundaries, it also creates that little bit of, sharing, giving some sort of motivational nugget to help females understand or help them push, right, against some invisible or perceived boundaries they might have. So international dialogue in this respect is very important.
Yeah, no, and it's certainly one of the priorities in terms of how the Gender Finance Task Force operates. It's not only about Luxembourg, but it's also that international dialogue and what we can exchange with other centres.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's time for a surprise question. As you know, each guest on the podcast asks the next guest a question. So one has come to you, which I'd like to put to you now.
Sure.
From Daniela Claassen, who is country head at RBS International in Luxembourg. Simple, straightforward, short, sharp question. I don't know if the answer is as short, sharp and simple. She says to you, if you could fix one thing in the workplace tomorrow, what would move the needle the most?
That's an interesting one, because I think there's a few things to address. But I would probably say, right, that females should stand up and advocate for each other stronger and more in the workspace. It's interesting, but sometimes I find, or I perceive, that it's easy for females to speak about it in forums, but actually in the workplace, in the moment,
to support each other in that effort.
It's harder. There's something about that, right? So I think we should have, as a female community, be bolder in our actions in the moment, and not just leave it for conversations outside of the actual workplace.
Okay, I like it. And of course, now you get to ask your question to the next guest. If we don't know who that will be,
Sure.
Is there something on your mind that you'd really like to hear whoever that person is answer?
I mean, maybe I'll just ask a question a little bit around the topics that we addressed, maybe even on the last one, around, support and influence. So my question to the next person that will be in my seat will be, how do you make sure that you impact or influence this topic beyond your immediate sphere of influence?
Okay, so very concrete, actionable points we want to hear from that next person.
Exactly.
Superb. Well, Lize-Mari, thanks so much for coming in and sharing those experiences and taking us through your journey, and also I think sharing some nuggets of advice that all of us can take away in terms of how we can design career, prioritize, and take that forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. It's a topic very close to my heart, so thank you for allowing me to speak to it.
I can
Thank
tell,
you.
yeah, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of those who've been watching and listening to the Gender Finance podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the stream on Spotify and on Apple Music rather, and do check out the Gender Finance website at gender-finance.com, and we'll see you soon.